I think one of the biggest misconceptions people have about creativity is that creative people always feel inspired. We imagine authors waking up every morning with brilliant ideas, artists overflowing with imagination, and filmmakers constantly motivated to pick up the camera and create something incredible. But the reality is much less glamorous than that. I mean, take it from me, from someone who does it all. No, I'm just joking. But I definitely don't do that. I just have spent countless hours digesting stuff and falling into the knowledge black hole. But it's something I see constantly. And I've experienced it myself in some way, shape, or form. Whether I'm writing YouTube scripts, designing something for my business, or working on another creative project. The truth is that a lot of creative work happens on the days you don't particularly feel like creating. And I think the important word is feel. Your feelings are going to change constantly. One day you'll wake up incredibly motivated and ideas will come naturally. The next day you'll stare at a blank page wondering where all that creativity went. But regardless of how you feel, sometimes there's still work that needs to be done. So rather than waiting around and hoping inspiration eventually strikes, I want to break down 3 things that help me continue creating when motivation has disappeared. Because I found there are ways to give inspiration a bit of a helping hand. The first thing is to build rituals around creative work rather than relying so heavily on motivation. This ties in quite nicely with my previous video on flow states, because I found that when you repeatedly create under similar conditions, those conditions almost become a signal that it's time to work. Instead of sitting around waiting until you magically feel creative, you build an environment that makes creativity likely to happen. I'll use writing and filming a YouTube video as my example. If I know I've got a day of writing ahead of me, I'll make a coffee, put on a good study or focus playlist, and sit down at my desk. I'll look through the little notes and ideas I've collected over the previous days or weeks. Some of those might only be a sentence or a few words, but they're enough for me to branch off on and start developing a script. Then I'll try to block out everything else and get to work. Obviously the temptations are still there. It's incredibly easy to open another YouTube tab, reach for your phone, or suddenly convince yourself that some completely unrelated task needs to be done immediately. You either have to remove those distractions beforehand or have enough discipline and willpower to recognize the urge and then ignore it. But that's why I find the rituals so useful. The coffee, music, journal, write. I've repeated the process enough times that I know what comes next. There's less negotiation involved. It's the same with going for a run, starting a workout, or even getting out of bed in the morning. The hardest part is often the transition from doing nothing to doing something. Once you've taken that first step, the momentum starts doing some of the work for you. Writing the first sentence makes the second sentence easier. Filming the first take makes the second one a little bit easier. Once you're moving, it's generally much easier to keep moving. Keep that in mind. And then of course there's the satisfaction afterwards. There's something incredibly rewarding about looking back at something you finished on a day when you originally didn't want to start. So build that ritual, try to follow roughly the same process each time. Eventually your brain begins to think and recognize those patterns. So you stop waiting to feel ready and you simply begin. My second point is something that almost sounds counterproductive, but I think it's incredibly useful. Lower the standard of what's expected from you at the beginning. It's pretty easy to take one step, right? It's also pretty easy to write one word. And it's pretty easy to do one push-up. And if you can do one, you probably can do another. And if you can do a few, you might as well keep going. And before you know it, you're doing the whole damn thing anyway, so why not? And I think we sometimes make creativity unnecessarily difficult because we sit down expecting ourselves to immediately produce the finalized product. We want the perfect script, we want the perfect photograph, the perfect drawing, and the perfect video. And because the standard is so ridiculously high before we even begun, it starts becoming intimidating. You don't need to make that masterpiece today. Your first attempt doesn't even need to be good, it just needs to exist. If you're writing and get the first draft on the page, if you're editing, throw the clips onto the timeline and start moving them around. If an idea comes to you while you're driving, record a voice memo. If you can't form proper sentences yet, just make dot points. If you're drawing, make a terrible sketch first. Give yourself something you can actually work with. Because once something exists, you can improve it. You can write that second draft and the third, you can change the edit, you can rewrite the sentence, you can reshoot something. Creativity, it doesn't have to be this beautiful moment where a perfect idea suddenly falls out of your head and completely finished. A lot of the time, it's just taking something rough and slowly shaping it and molding it to be something you're proud of. I've actually found that lowering that standard at the beginning can produce better work in the end, because I'm no longer paralyzed by trying to make everything perfect immediately. So momentum beats the perfection. Get moving first and improve it afterwards. The final point I want to talk about goes a little deeper, and that's to create because who you are becoming rather than simply how you feel today. This might sound strange at first, but you've stuck with me this far, so hear me out. If you decided that you wanted to become a writer, then write. If you want to become a filmmaker, pick up the camera. If you want to become an artist, then make art. If you want to build something, then build. There was probably a reason you wanted to start in the first place. Maybe somebody inspired you. Maybe you've always felt drawn towards it. Maybe you've discovered something that made you feel alive and you wanted to pursue it further. Whatever it was, remember that reason. There's a massive difference between saying I created when I feel inspired and saying I create because I'm becoming someone who creates. One puts your work at the mercy of an emotion. The other starts making it part of your identity as a whole. And if you forget why you're doing it, write that reason down. Put it somewhere where you'll see it every single day. Have it sitting in your journal. Write it into big bold letters on the wall, whatever you need to. Because there will always be days when you've forgotten that excitement. For myself, I create because I genuinely enjoy it. I enjoy sitting down and turning an idea into something real. I enjoy making videos and I enjoy building things through my business. I enjoy looking back at something that once existed only as a thought in my head and now it exists physically in the world for people to enjoy. And the deeper I've gone into my faith, the more I've started to appreciate creation itself. God is the creator and we're made in his image. I think there's something incredibly meaningful about taking the abilities we've been given and using them to create something good rather than spending our entire lives simply consuming what everybody else creates. That's also part of my reason for making these videos. If something I create encourages somebody else to pick up the pen, camera, paintbrush, or whatever other tool speaks to them, then that's fantastic. And even more importantly to me, if something I say about God, Jesus Christ, or Scripture encourages even one person to start asking questions, pick up the Bible, or move closer towards God, then there's a much greater purpose behind the work than simply getting another view. When the motivation disappears, purpose gives you something stronger to fall back on. So I'll leave you with those 3 things for now. Build rituals around your creative work so you aren't constantly relying on motivation. Lower that standard at the beginning and give yourself permission to make something rough. And finally, remember who you're trying to become and why you wanted to create in the first place. Motivation will come and go. We know that. Some mornings you wake up overflowing with ideas and other days you'll have absolutely nothing. That's normal. Don't worry about it. You don't need to panic every time inspiration disappears. Because one of the interesting things I've found is that motivation often arrives after you're already started. You'll write that first sentence without feeling particularly inspired, then another follows. 20 minutes later, you're completely absorbed in the work and wondering why it was so difficult in the beginning. So don't sit around waiting for that inspiration to knock on the door. Give it a helping hand and meet it halfway. If you have any little rituals, tricks, or methods to help you create when you're not feeling motivated, I'd love to hear them as always. Let me know what you're creating yourself down in the comments so we can all steal a little bit of inspiration from one another. As always, I'm Jaden Conley, and thank you for watching.